Thank you very much. I welcome also all of you at this workshop where we are going to discuss about the impact of the regulations. And I'm happy to present as coordinator the Robotics for EU project, where we are facilitating the impact of the positive impact of robotics and what to do to make the adoption of robotics in Europe more widespread. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I'm sure you agree that robots definitely are a source of economic growth and they can offer a lot of benefits to the society and to the economy. But especially during the pandemic, also there was a rapid increase in uptake of robots. However, there are also some societal concerns, of course, which arise next to this technological, very rapid development. So, next slide. So, this is why we, as a project, are focusing also on the non-technological aspects of robots. So, of course, as IT specialists, programmers, we are capable of preparing and developing different technologies and robots. But what about all the societal concerns and topics? So, based on the desktop literature and materials, we identified that definitely socioeconomic issues, ethics, data, legal topics, and education and management are the main topics if we speak about non-technological aspects of robots, which should be engaged somehow then to the research and also development of robots. Next slide, please. So this is what we have titled as responsible robotics, because we believe that interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary collaboration in developing robots is what helps us to mitigate different negative impacts of the uptake of robots. And also it means that if we are developing robots in collaboration with different scientists, with different experts from various areas, then most probably we are also interested in engaging the end users of our products. And this is what helps us to gain the acceptance of the society and the end users of our products. Next slide, please. We wanted to implement the same approach also in our project. So this is why we asked more than 1,000 people across Europe. And actually, additionally to this survey, which you can see here, we had a separate, let's say, survey, but it was more than a survey. It was, we organized more than 12 workshops for 700 citizens across Europe, and even also we had some participants from US and Asia to see that what are the opinions among the robotics community, citizens and policymakers. And I'm also glad to announce that 26% of the respondents were from the inspection and maintenance domain, which is our topic here today. So next slide, please. So what were the main results? The main results which the robotics community gave us is that there is one main concern, and this is the fear of technological unemployment. And also, if we ask those 700 plus citizens, this was the main concern. So definitely, you as experts, we have to consider this if we want to make this widespread adoption of robots happen in Europe. then we have to acknowledge that this is the main concern. And of course, if we speak about inspection and maintenance robots, then safety and security, different data issues are also crucial for people. And what was interesting is that, of course, everyone acknowledged the role of industrial robots, that they are quite widely accepted, but also the respondents mentioned that perhaps there are not so many intelligent robots yet on the market, and if they will be at some point on the market, then they believe that also this adoption and acknowledgement and acceptance will happen naturally, which is, I think, a good news. So next slide, please. What was also heavily stressed was the cooperation and the importance of cooperation between policymakers and robotics community. And I think that especially in the context of our today's topic, and this is crucial. So there were several shortcomings in this current collaboration mentioned. And one of those was that there is not enough information which is available for the decision makers to make those decisions based on solid information. So the recommendations which also the policymakers themselves made were that we should really make all kinds of information available to them. So it obviously also means being proactive, introducing different developments in research and development of robots, and that we should be creative in thinking what could those cooperation models be. And it clearly means that we need some clear processes to educate also policymakers to work together with them. And if we move on to the next slide, then to summarize, I think that next to collaborating with policymakers, we have also the similar trend if we talk to the potential end users of robots, of industrial robots or also citizens, that we have to have more educational and engagement activities to make sure that the positive impacts of robots are acknowledged. And if we come back now to the safety, to the inspection and maintenance robots, then of course safety and privacy are important, so that in developing these robots we should consider these points. And coming back to the topic of our workshop today, of course, I think we will have later on the opportunity to discuss that what is the role of regulations in this process, and whether and how we could, as experts, also contribute so that the regulation is not hindering the development of robots, but is helping the experts. So, and the next slide, please. I also would like to invite you that if you have any robots which are already developed, or you are thinking of a robot that should be developed in the future, to contact my colleague from Danish Board of Technology. You see the email address here. We are offering this wonderful opportunity to everyone to test together those robotics ideas or robotics solutions with the end users and citizens. And we strongly believe that this can give a very valuable insight to the development process for the future. And on the next slide, you can see a very intriguing title, and this is the Responsible Robotics Maturity Assessment Model, which we are developing in our project. And this should be one of the tools which could help to assess different dimensions which are there if we are developing responsible robotics solutions. And I'm happy that our colleague from consortium is now going to present more precisely this maturity assessment model and what we are planning for. And I hope that this will also give a nice basis for our further discussions here today. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a very insightful workshop.
Thank you, Anneli. Now we will look at the maturity assessment model presentation.
Hello, I'm Agnès Delaborde. I work with the French National Laboratory for Metrology and Testing, and I'm going to make a short introduction to the maturity assessment model that we plan to develop in the Robotics for EU project. First of all, as you have probably understood, in the project we deal with 5 big issues that we have identified relative to the acceptability of robots. Namely, we have identified ethical issues, socioeconomic issues, issues relative to legal aspects. We know that there are many questions around data, and another topic of issue concerns education and engagement of the society. In Robotics for EU, we perform a lot of activities to ensure that we cover a wide spectrum of expressions of interest and issues. We consult the general public, the research community, academics on the whole. We explore also the opinion of the industry, and we also cover the public of policymakers. We have carried out many events, and some of them are currently ongoing. Our final objective is to design an assessment grid that will help people to understand to what extent and through which means the robots can be accepted by society. A mature robot, what we can call mature robot, or a mature design process. This has to be defined. It would then earn some kind, the robot or the process would earn some kind of a label that would to some extent represent the level of maturity, some sort of a score of maturity that could be easy to understand, and above all, that is useful for all the concerned stakeholders. We've got one first question. We want to understand how this scoring can be performed. Shall it be external inspectors that analyze, explore the robots or the processes and provide score this level of maturity? Shall it be the designer himself or herself who compute the score of maturity before, for example, selling the robot? Shall it be the end user, so the person willing to buy the robot or to use the robot, who shall perform this computation of the score? It's still an open question. We also wonder about the type of tools that we need for estimating the level of maturity. Shall it be questions asked to someone, to the designer, for example? Shall it be some kind of measurement? Shall it be also, I don't know, any type of scoring, in fact? So all the tools to carry out a proper assessment of the maturity need to be explored. So this is what we do in the project, to understand what are the tools to do that. We also want to understand what is a good score of maturity, depending on what context, for what objective, for what goal in the end. Is it important that all robots have a good, perfect score of maturity, or does it depend, for example, from the context of application of the robot? This is another question that we are trying to solve in the project. To give you an example, so far we have carried out several consultations. We focus on these 3 aspects. What are the tools? What is really the score of maturity, what does it mean, and also who are the stakeholders around this score. We obtained some initial insights about the topics. Concerning the tools, we understand that there is most of all a need for identifying and designing what we can call estimators. So everything that, well, when put together, can provide us the score on the whole. Concerning the score itself, one thing that was really important is almost everyone agree on the fact that the score must be a reward, not a punishment, meaning that a low maturity score should lead perhaps to some enhancement of the robot, but not a punishment, not something telling you that, no, the robot should not go on the market because the score is too bad. So you see here the overall idea. We want to be useful. We want this score to be useful. Concerning the stakeholders, a few words about them as well. Apparently, it seems that it will be interesting for end users, the person who are really going to use the robot, but also for supervision entities. It makes sense that it is computed by the producer, so the designer of the robot, and it can also be performed by a third-party auditor as well. To give you an idea, concrete idea of what could be this maturity assessment model, it can take the form of an assessment grid. Here we see a real simple, a really basic example. So for all 5 domains that we identified, it can be checkpoints. And the question is, first, well, what should be in these checkpoints, but also what can it be? What can the score be? Shall it be a pass-fail score? Shall it be, well, something a bit more subtle? In any case, it must be a guidance so as to improve maturity. In the project, we still have a lot of consultation ongoing. We still need to gather a lot of references. We don't work alone. We need to know what are the other good practices in the community. So sharing knowledge will be really important for us. Thanks a lot.
Hello, everyone. Natasha. So that you know, I'm present. I managed to be present. So in case there are questions, I'll be here for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnes. Now I would like to give the floor to our experts, Marit, Sandelin, and Peter Warhan, who will tell you a little bit about the rules and regulations hindering the uptake of robotics in inspection and maintenance. And hopefully we will have a chance to, at least throughout the presentation, answer or at least touch upon some of the points which we have discussed in the brainwriting. So Marit, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just checking where can I switch the slides. Oh, something happened. Okay, I guess also Peter, you are online, right?
Yes, I'm online.
Great. Okay. So hello everyone, and let me just if the slides are not. Oh, here you go. Okay. No, sorry, I can't figure out how to switch the slides. I think it's this one, right? Okay, great. Sorry about that. All right, so everyone, I'm Maritz Sandelin and I work for Sprint Robotics, and I've been working on Sprint Robotics a little over 3 years now. I currently work as the European Network Manager, so I handle or work with companies who are in and around of Europe. And then I am also working with the RIMA project, and I am handling the network for the RIMA side of things as well. And I have a software background, so I have plenty of years of experience from Sony and Nokia in different types of software, digitalization, IoT, telecom projects. Peter?
Okay, Peter Voorhans, as Maarit already mentioned, also working for Sprint Robotics, but before that time I spent more than 30 years for a big asset owners called the Dow Chemical Company, where I was available for the implementation of technology, and robotics, of course, was one of the most important ones. So not only at the local level, but also in Europe and also at the global level. So I hope that I can help you a little bit with more, let's say, some practical information coming from the asset owners.
Yes, so I will shortly give a very short introduction to Sprint Robotics, but then also the RIMA project, and after that we will then jump into the rules and regulations point of view, and also Peter will give a nice overview of internal policies that can really help the use of robotics, and then we will look at more the outside regulations that are hindering the use of robotics. So Sprint Robotics is founded in 2015, and we are a not-for-profit organization. And our whole purpose is to facilitate the use of robotics in inspection and maintenance. So we believe robotics are important for safety improvements, environmental safety improvements as well, of course, cost avoidance and reductions, and then performance improvements. Currently, Sprint Robotics has around 100 organizations globally that are part of the organization. And as said, we are really focused on achieving not only the use, but then also large-scale use of robotics in different industries. So we are an end-user-driven organization, which means that we have the whole value chain part of the organization, but our end users are the ones who have a view and a decision saying authority in this. So going forward, as said, we work with different industries. So because of historics, we are at the moment quite oil and gas, or have been quite oil and gas driven, but we are currently also involved in renewable energy, water industries, so other industries as well. What we do is we try to get the value chain together in arranging different types of webinars, seminars. We have a community tool where people can discuss and share information. We do different types of reports, so different publications. And for example, I think a few weeks back, we released our latest version of the Sprint Robotics Roadmap that's available for free download on the website. We are also part of the RIMA network, as mentioned. We do different types of demonstrations, technology demonstrations, or roadshows. For the roadshows, we basically take around 10 companies and we take them to the parking slots or inside the facilities of the end users so that the actual people who will be working with robots can come and see them and actually play around with them and ask questions. And hopefully that way we can educate people on what robotics are and what they are doing and which way they are going. So if we look at the trends, so I believe when we started, it was more about the technology, where the technology is, where is it going, and how can we make it better. At the moment, I think the technology is quite there, but now it's more about how do we get the robots into the everyday work environments, and how can we do scaling, and how can we really get the robots into the workplace. And of course, I believe everybody sees the future as being more unmanned facilities, more AI, algorithms, analyzing the data as it comes so that people are not involved in the normal everyday things, but then involved in when something happens, something critical happens that they need to be involved in. So if somebody wants to know more, there's a digital brochure, story.sprintrobotics.org, if you want to take a look at what we work with and what people are saying about Sprint Robotics. And then RIMA. So RIMA is an EU-funded project, started in the beginning of 2019. It is supposed to end in December this year, but because of COVID reasons, we will get a short extension. So most likely then we will end in latest June next year. So we had a budget of 60 million euros, and 8 million of these we have distributed through 2 open calls. So the first open call is done and dusted, so all the projects are finished. And we are currently, the second open call projects are currently ongoing. So altogether, I believe we funded 50 projects in these 2 open calls. So very interesting projects. And if you want to follow what the projects are doing, then you can take a look at either the RIMA website or the RIMA community tool. Similarly as Sprint Robotics, so the RIMA is trying to facilitate the uptake of robotics in different industries. There are 13 digital innovation hubs that are part of the RIMA project, and also then a number of industry organizations such as Water Europe, Foratom, and Sprint Robotics is then also more an industrial organization than a digital innovation hub. We have 6 different industries that we are working with, and we also, the open calls were targeted for. And we, our main vision is to then reinforce the leadership, European leadership of inspection and maintenance robotics. And we are trying to do this in a similar way as we are doing in Sprint Robotics. So we are bringing the value chain together, and also then facilitating this cross-border cooperation through the network. So connecting everyone under one roof, supporting the end user to share the challenges, supporting the SMEs, not only through funding, but also then networking and information. And then we also have some training sessions that we've been doing in robotics through the digital innovation hubs. So at the moment, it's free to join the RIMA network. So you're very welcome to join and then get involved. Just a few numbers. So we all know that the robotics are used more and more. So the industry is growing and the use of robotics is growing. And currently we see that, we don't see that, but there are statistics to say that 88% of businesses worldwide are thinking of robotics in some way or another into their infrastructure. And this 88% is all the industries in the world. So it's not only inspection and maintenance. But why inspection and maintenance is really interested in robotics is mainly due to safety, efficiency, and of course, cost that comes through efficiency and other aspects. Safety, so we don't want people at heights, we don't want people in confined spaces, and we don't want people underwater, because we see that all of these things could be done by robots. And I believe every year there are accidents and fatalities involved in the inspection and maintenance industry that could be prevented by using robots. Efficiency, so we feel that the efficiency comes through what you need to do beforehand or afterwards. So not mainly to the robot being faster than a human, which might not always be the case, but it comes from the fact that you don't have to shut down facilities, you don't have to do any of the clearing or the cleaning parts of things. You don't need to take air samples before people can enter confined spaces. You don't need to do different permit checks. So you basically don't need to do scaffolding or any other parts. So you just basically let the robot do its work. I think Peter has a lot of examples of this one. Yeah, so basically I just have an example here of the Elias 2. So they say that by using the drone, Elias drone, so they went from the inspection time from 6 weeks to just 2 weeks. And of course, the number of hours and the people needed also reduced, and definitely safety improvements as well. So there are plenty of examples of different types of efficiency that is quite remarkable. So because even though the results are so good, we have the technology, but I think the use of robotics is really hindered by a lot of different obstacles. And one of them we see are regulations and policies. so the legislation part of things, but then it's also the people. So how do you get the people who are currently doing the work, or the people who would be who make the decision of using robotics, buying robotics? How do we get them on board? And then I will then switch over to Peter, so you can give us a really nice example.
Okay, thanks, Maarit. Okay, now as mentioned before, I spent more than 30 years at a huge chemical company across the globe, and I think 7 years ago there was a leadership decision that we were not longer allowed to have people in a confined space. So that means that we had to look for different solutions, right? So 6-7 years ago, we kicked off with robotics. To be honest, we had no idea. We were playing with Lego because there was nothing available yet. So we started, and okay, there was a clear statement from, hey, you're not allowed to do it anymore. Oh, what are we going to do? So we started to work with robotics. Okay, a hard deadline, 2025, and in 2025, it's not longer allowed to work in a confined space entry. ADAO. So a clear statement. And if you need to deviate, or if you need to do a confined space, let's say the old traditional method, people going into a confined space entry, then you need to have additional approval. So you need to raise the barrier. And now at the moment, ADAO, as soon as you would like to conduct a confined space, you need to have approval, not from your boss, your boss's boss, and your boss's boss's boss. So that means 3 layers. So at the moment, for a confined space entry, robotics is, let's say, more or less the default solutions. And if not, then you need to find a way to get approval. So that's that. To be honest, that's not always easy. And also, if you need to go to your boss once per day, that's not bad. Twice per day, then he's okay. 3 times per day, and when he needs to escalate to his boss or his boss's boss, then it becomes angry. So we were able to raise the barrier, and I think at the moment at DAO, they were able to reduce more than 80% of the confined spaces. We're not there yet, but you see, when you have a clear statement from top leadership, top down, then you can make some serious steps. So at the moment, for inspection, I think we're almost doing everything with robotics. But now, of course, we need to make the next step. After inspection, you need to do some maintenance, some other activities, painting, welding, grinding, all that kind of stuff. So it will be, to be honest, it will be a challenge. But they're not there yet. But let's say 3 years to go. But they're going into the right direction. So I already explained. So the road to success is when you have a clear management mandate with a clear deadline. The first one was 2020. The first one was 2025. It was going very well. So they already said, okay, it's going into the right direction. Let's say for inspection, put it on 2023, and for all the other things that you need to do in a confined space entry, it will be 2025. So a clear deadline is important, and let's say leadership engagement is in my opinion very important. And I already typed something in the chat. How can you convince your people? Because technically we can do a lot, but the social impact, because most of the time the inspections or the work with robots has to be done by an inspector. But you need to convince your inspector, because some of these inspectors, they are already doing this for more than 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. And now suddenly they need to work with a robot, with remote visual, with a tablet, with an iPad, with a camera, with a screen. So that's very difficult. So okay, the way we try to convince the inspectors and the people that had to work with robots, we purchased 5 different kits: one for North America, one for Latin America, one for Europe, and one for I think it's Asia Pacific. These kits, they were exactly the same. So that means that they have the same drone in EMEA as in Pacific as Latin America, just to make sure that the people are getting familiar with robots. So they were able to play with robots. They were able to touch the robot, to smell the robot, to do everything with a robot, because at the end, we would like to have a robot in each inspector's toolbox. We're not there yet, but that was, I think, a very wise decision to give similar robots to the entire organization, so at the global level. And we also asked the people from, hey, when you have a great solution, or when you're able to do something, please produce a one paper, so a simple overview with best practices, how, why, how much, what's the reason. So a one pager. And we started to share these one pages across the globe. Now, I told you I left the Dow. I left the Dow company by January 1st, but I think we kicked this off in 2017, and at the moment we have more than 1,000 one pages available with best solutions and best practices. So when you have a system in place that you can share best practices across your organization, and that the people do not need to reinvent the wheel every week, every day, every month, then you can make some big steps. And of course, so that's on my sheet. So best practices and use cases, and also give some positive recognition. As soon as you have a great solution, put it on a website, order cookies, do something, but celebrate results. That's one of the most important things that I would like to mention. As soon as you have something good, celebrate and make people proud. So talking about make people proud, at the beginning, all the people, they were a little bit concerned from, hey, a robot, what do I need to do with a robot? And then then I ordered 100 golden wings, similar to what the pilot has. So Alibaba, for $40 each. So I ordered 100 wings. And I gave to all the employees who completed the short robotic training, because also the training was not available. But okay, we said, okay, you followed the training, the results were very good. I give you a wing. And the people, they were so proud, because now they were wearing a golden wing, similar to a pilot. And the entire population was asking from, hey, what are you doing? Where's that? What's that wing? So it's also an advice to make people proud, to make people proud, and to celebrate, let's say the good things. And that helped us a lot to help us with the acceptance of robotics. Now, hey, people were, other colleagues were asking from, hey, why are you wearing that wing? I also would like to have that wing. What do I need to do to wear that wing? So that worked very well. So now I already mentioned a high percentage of the inspection and maintenance tasks at Dow are robotized. For inspection, no, I think on my sheet it was 85. It's booming because robotics is mandatory. The first step will be, can you do it by using robotics? And if not, then you need to find another solution. But always default, each inspection plan has a statement, can you do it by robotics? And if not, then you're allowed to find an alternative. So it's using robotics is a standard operating method for confined spaces. We're also working on elevated height, so scaffolding, for example, because most of the fatalities in the chemical industry are because of a confined space or elevated height. So also the company is looking for something to let's say to reduce the number of people exposed to elevated height. Okay, what are the barriers now? If you would like to work with robotics, the acceptance of countries, legislation, that's, to be honest, that's a disaster. Not only in the Netherlands, and not only in Europe, but also at the global level. And it can be the case, just to give you an idea, that a method that it has been accepted by the TÜV Nord in Germany, but not accepted by the TÜV South. Hey, come on, it's the same company, it's the same organization. Please talk with each other and create a list or do something. But otherwise, we need to do it all over again every week, every month. So legislation, regulation is important. And and then in the interpretation of regulation is also an issue, not only for the service providers but also for the notified bodies. Let me go to the next one. So acceptance of robotics, no, that's not always accepted by the local authorities and also not by the certified inspectors. There's a lot of lack of knowledge, trust of the technology. Standards are not up to date or not always up to date. So yeah, that's an issue. So that's the reason that we also kicked off a project within Sprint Robotics to talk with Cefic, to talk about legislation. Because in my opinion, it's ridiculous that sometimes you're not allowed to do something in Germany, but you're allowed to do it in the Netherlands, not allowed in England or in the UK, allowed in France. So sometimes in the neighborhood of an airport, that's an issue or can be an issue. In another country, it's not an issue. So we definitely need to ask, some clarity about legislation. Okay, that's also something from France and a robotic inspector.
Yeah, the France example was about a storage tank inspection where two different companies, for the other one it was allowed to do a robotic inspection, but then for the other company it was not allowed to do the robotic inspection. So just a different interpretation by the inspectors, and it's very hard to get by these. Yeah.
The inspection of cross borders. Okay, I think I already explained that one. Also, the notified bodies the notified bodies are the persons who are making the law. They are inspection companies. So, would you be interested as a notified body who's earning money if people start using robotics? Because these companies, they're selling hours. So that's also something that, in my opinion, that we need to improve because they are involved, but at the other hand, they're losing money if we start using robotics. So this is also a tricky question, and in my opinion, also something that we need to improve because okay, notified bodies they are important, and I think we need these companies for advice, but now they're also involved in legislation. So that's something, in my opinion, that we need to improve. Last one, notified bodies. Okay, legislation. That's what I already told you. So the TÜV Nord and the TÜV Süd, that they have that we need to do it all over again. So that's an issue. Now also an issue, flying with drones. Okay, now to be honest, in Europe at the moment it's going into the right direction. We have some European legislation, so that's going well. Although sometimes it's not in all zones, red zones, restricted zones. Sometimes you need to have a permit. Sometimes you do not need to have a permit. So it's difficult, but it's it's become better. It's getting better and better. But also, legislation and regulation with respect to pilots, it's also difficult. Permits are extremely hard to get because sometimes you need to have approval from the airport authorities. Sometimes you do not need to have approval. So that's also a very difficult story, and that will take you a couple of months to prepare a drone flight. So that's also something that that needs to be improved. And last but not least, I think that's something that we learned a week ago, because as Sprint Robotics, we are going to organize a demo day, and we would like to have pilots from the UK, from the US and Canada, but foreign pilots are also not allowed to fly in Europe. So yes, we have European legislation, but at the other hand, sometimes you have very specialized companies from abroad who are not allowed to fly or to work with robots without certification. What else do we have? Okay, what's needed now? I think at European level, acceptance of inspection technology. The notified bodies, they need to accept remote visual. Sometimes, for example, there's a statement that it needs to be a visual inspection, and a visual means that the guy needs to do it with his own eyes, right? But when we are able to add one word, and that said remote visual, then we're done. Because remote visual means cameras, drones, do something with glasses, streaming data. So that's all something that we need to improve. Now, the first inspection that's in the law should always be a visual one. So we would like to change that to remote visual. And then, of course, acceptance as legislation. Okay. And also in combination with artificial intelligence, that's something that we need to do. We're not there yet, but I think in the near future you will see a lot more with drones by using AI. So there's no legislation yet. How are we going to interpret that and the data coming from AI? So that's also something that we need to do. Talking about training, I'm running out of time. So training at the moment, the drone pilots and the guys who are working with robots are inspectors. And I know that inspectors, they need to follow a training. It can be a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3. But at the moment, there's nothing mentioned, and they do not have anything in their curricula that says something about robotics or remote visual. So that's also something that we need to challenge the schools, that we need to do something with robotics, because at the moment there's nothing available. I think that's it. Maarit, you can do the last one.
No, I was just going to say that we definitely need changes and we definitely need improvements.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maarit and Peter. I think this is a great introduction also to the panel, because we can discuss some of these topics a bit later. But also, I would like to invite our participants to ask any questions they may have specifically for the two of you, because we have some time before we take a break. So if you have any questions, you may either write them in chat, or you can also turn the audio on and ask them yourselves.
We were crystal clear, Maarit.
I think so, but we only had problems, no solutions. So
I have a question. Sorry, it's about just a small detail, something that I'm not sure I understood. It's about visual remote. What do you mean about that?
Now, for a remote, a visual inspection means that an inspector need to see it with his own eyes.
Oh, okay.
So he needs to be there. He needs to have a piece of paper, and he needs to check everything with his own eyes. But when we're talking about remote visual, that can easily be that a robot technician streams data or streams information to a person in China
For inspection.
For inspection. So for the moment, it's not allowed because he needs to be there.
Yes.
But when we are able to do it remote by using cameras, by streaming data to an expert, and that expert can be everywhere, then
yes.
we can make some.
Okay. So now I understand better everything that you presented, because in this part I understood it in my own way, and when you were talking about visual remote, I was thinking directly on the trouble linked with robotics and the directive for machinery, where we know that normally in the previous version of the directive you cannot operate a machine without being able to see the machine visually. So I was thinking on the operator's side. I was confused.
But to be honest, you're talking about acceptance tests, and at the moment they are allowed. So yes, we are allowed to do an acceptance test by using cameras or by streaming data to a person in China or Japan. So that's allowed. But for inspection, that's not allowed.
Okay.
So for inspection, we need to make a clear statement that we would like to have approval for a remote visual, not only visual, remote visual.
Okay, so now it's clear for me. Okay.
Good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. Do we have another question that we can take from the audience? Or we can maybe go on a short break and come back ready for the next presentation.
Will the slides be shared with us?
Yes. Yes, we will share the recording and the slides with you after.
Thank you for having me. I'm just going to share the link for the department where I work so that, you can go through that, and here we gain time. But just as a quick introduction to myself, I'm a social scientist focused on science, technology, and innovation. I work at the Technical University of Munich at the Department of Science, Technology, and Society. So the content of this workshop has totally to do with the department where I work and with the field of studies in which I work and where I study. The master students that I supervise all have to do with this. So I have supervised students doing research on the cultures of robotics research in Spain, in Romania, in the EU. Thesis looking at digital innovation hubs and what it means to implement them at different countries. So all of that. Just to mention a little bit about the project where I currently work. This is a joint co-founded by Horizon 2020 and by Erasmus Plus University Network called the Eurotech Engineering University. We are 6 universities, technical universities across Europe. We try to increase the awareness of responsible research and innovation in these universities. We try to increase co-creative activities between these universities and their ecosystems, and we try to develop lifelong learning strategies. So I think, yeah, the case of inspection and maintenance and other areas of robotics are key in here. How can we engage with the users in the end? How should we design programs for them? But the research I'm going to be presenting today, it's rather from the previous project where I worked, also funded by the EU. We were looking at co-creation instruments, 3 of them across 11 countries, looking at 3 technological domains: robotics, urban energy, and autonomous driving. I was mainly looking at robotics and following other European projects just to see how they start, how they end, how they continue afterwards. So one of the main projects that captivated me the most was about inspection and maintenance. So I'm going to be talking about this later on. So the project that I looked at, it was the same scenario, looking at the development of 2 robotic platforms, one terrestrial one and one aerial one, one drone. So we'll look into the story of this one a bit later. So to start with the topic of today, and with the work of RIMA and with the work of inspection and maintenance robotics, they are bringing together innovation and maintenance, which are pretty different activities. Innovation commonly is considered sexy. It is usually very appreciated. Its focus is to make new things. It is future-oriented. It celebrates disruption to make new things, new practices. It's mainly concerned with growth, and it's usually done or seem to be done by heroic entrepreneurs. Maintenance, by contrast, is considered boring, is usually overlooked. Its goal is to make things last. It is present-oriented. It celebrates durability. Its main concern is addressing the fragility and vulnerability of things. And currently it's done by invisible people that do not appear in the news. So they are pretty different things. Certainly, there's tons of ways in which innovation and maintenance relate, but we know very little about that. There's very little literature about that and little practice about that. So the question that has been driving my interest while looking at these areas is that as innovation aims at improving maintenance, we have to learn as well, what can innovation learn from maintenance practices, and how can maintenance improve innovation? So I've been looking at different things since I got in, since I learned about this area of robotics. So I did a case study of a long-term project, one of the first ones that the EU funded for making inspection and maintenance robots. This case was about sewer infrastructure. I conducted around 15 interviews at different times of the project. Even a couple of years after the project was over, I've continued going back to learn about what people, what they experienced, what they thought the challenge were, what happened to the participants later on, what other projects they involved in. So that sort of provides an interesting picture of the continuity from one innovation policy to the next one. We have also tried to engage with practitioners, so we have organized workshops at the European Robotics Forum. We have invited people participating and coordinating projects on inspection and maintenance robots, and also from other networks of digital innovation hubs. And of course, I have been following many events that RIMA has organized, that Robotics for EU has organized, that similar projects have organized, to try to learn from the outside a little bit, and try to come up with a way to facilitate the dialogue that is so needed in these areas. So this is more or less a map, a bit ugly, but that's the best I have at the moment. Here I present the main projects on inspection and maintenance robotics funded by the European Commission that I have identified and that I have been trying to learn about, and also the innovation policy instruments that have been steering how these projects have developed. We don't have to stop too much into that, but we can see that there is RIMA, there is Petrobot, that was the very first project on this area that the Commission funded. I know Sprint Robotics was an outcome of that. Here we can see as well, there is Robotics for EU at the end, so I'm considering part of all this. So probably this is the main argument that I want to say today, that to overcome policy issues in inspection and maintenance robotics, we, amongst other things, we also need to examine the effects of individual policy instruments over this field. And we have to examine the dynamics of different instruments together, how they work, how they enable or also constrain the continuity of different projects. So let's go into details into this project that I've learned the most. So this was called Public and User-Driven Technological Innovation. This was one of the key projects funded by, sub-projects funded by one big, large initiative called the European Robotics, the European Coordination Hub for Open Robotics Technology. This project lasted like 10 years. So loads of what the European Commission learned about how to engage roboticists with end users across sectors, that comes from there. So this project had 3 phases. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that included evaluations in between each phase. The goal was to attract public entities to submit challenges that could be solved with robots. And the winner one, and the one that was taken, was a Spanish public water network manager. Then later on, 6 technology providing consortia applied. 3 made it to phase 1, and then 2 advanced towards the end of phase 3. There were 2 main teams then that made it till the end of the project. Here we can call them just the drone team and the 6-wheeler team. They had different formations, like who were part of the consortium. For the drone team, it was a research center, one SME that later on disappeared, unfortunately, and one subcontractor for sewer inspection services. And the other team was just 2 universities and 1 robotics SME. So what happened with the project? Let's see what I have learned. So first, the public end user was not the only end user. So sewer maintenance is usually done by a subcontractor that gets licenses for different amounts of time in different places. Subcontractors didn't provide formal input to the definition of the challenge, sewer inspection, and what the solution should look like, only informally. The drone team was formally evaluated then by the public end user, but also informally by the subcontractor that was part of their consortium. At the end of phase 3, neither the public end user nor the subcontractor were willing to purchase or to keep funding the technologies for different reasons. Not that they were afraid of robots, not that they were not interested, but still, the public end user didn't want to directly fund one technology that is considered risky for workers' jobs. So what we learned from this is that the policy instrument, public and user-driven technological innovation, was probably too rigid to respond to the complexities of the situation, but it was too weak to provide further directions for what all the participants could do. So some possibilities to repair this instrument, it's that probably to overcome fears, the instruments should provide mechanisms to identify what counts as an adequate way of deliberation and of making decisions that are specific to this particular interinstitutional contexts and interinstitutional consortia that we're developing out of these projects. Also, I think that besides technical progress, so going from technological readiness level, I don't know, 2 to 5, there's other things that what can be examined to produce like stronger evidence to say these robots are or could make a very interesting impact here. So this would include how well roboticist teams and the maintenance workers work together. How do robots empower the inspection and maintenance workers? How teams co-create a vision of the whole inspection process together. So going from the logistics of service to how the different robot platforms could be transported, brought into the scene, brought into action. How would robots be fixed, by whom? All this, I think, has to be part of the discussions and of the imagination of that possible scenarios. So now let's look at the instruments altogether. So this public end user and the teams that were that participated were both invited. Well, they were all invited to apply for another big European project on inspection and maintenance that came out by the time that this project was about to finish. But the public end user decided that they would prioritize other projects and other challenges, so they were not able to apply. So inspection of sewers were not the main challenge that they were interested in tackling. But also this follow-up EU project didn't accept academic partners in their consortia. So the six-wheeler team that had 2 universities as the big part of the team decided not to apply. The SME could have gone alone, or but they decided that they couldn't do that to their partners. And the drone team, well, since the EU project didn't accept large companies as part of the consortia applying, the drone team also decided not to apply either. Later on, they both and everyone kept working in the area of inspection and maintenance robots. So the six-wheeler team continued in a different project on oil and gas platforms and their inspection. And the drone team continued looking at the rail infrastructure and also got involved into developing another project focused on training 10 doctoral researchers in conducting inspection and maintenance drones. But then the sewer workers are still in the same conditions than years ago when the project started. And the technical teams have had to start over and over again as they shift from one field to another one. So some possibilities to repair these policy instruments and their continuity is that we should go probably beyond this strategy of just looking at who ends up the project and who manages to apply successfully for the next round of projects. There could also, besides that, there could be a little bit more orientation. Probably it's also important not to remove too quickly the teams from this protected innovation environment that these types of projects provide. So the niche of development shouldn't be just removed too quickly. It's important to identify what the participants in these projects value. Is it like to keep working with the same people? Do they have preferences for particular fields or not? They are the ones that form the ecosystem, so understanding their interests is very important. So we have to learn how to make instruments compatible rather than making each other crowd out. Instruments have to be more flexible to adapt to the complexities of the situation. And yeah, we should also have to identify the dynamics between different calls for projects, whether these are from the EU or from other organizations, like at the national or local level. So just to conclude, I think we should explore as well how the learning trajectories of different types of stakeholders that get involved in different projects, in a sequence of projects on inspection and maintenance robots. We have to learn how to provide maintenance to the innovation networks, and that's something that I assume, well, and I have seen that Sprint Robotics have done very, very great. And also we have to learn how to repair innovation policy instruments themselves by identifying what are their contradictions, their fragilities, and their vulnerabilities. And certainly, as the topic for this webinar today, we have to make more close and durable engagement between experts in inspection and maintenance, roboticists, project coordinators, policymakers, regulators, and, well, sociologists of technology, or people that are training, like looking at what exactly happens when you try to develop and adopt and fix and change technologies. So that's all I have for today. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions or to our discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Do we have any questions from the audience for Carlos in regards to the presentation? I know I have a lot of questions, but I will wait until the panel discussion, so perhaps we can. Okay, we have Vasilis who has a question, so I will like to give a floor to Vasilis to ask. Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. It's the first time I use this software. Thank you, Carlos. This was excellent. Excellent presentation. I'm very much interested in the. I come from Edinburgh, from the STIS department in Edinburgh, and I'm interested in value alignment in expectations. Have you encountered sort of different promises, expectations about the future in your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we should stay in touch later on that, because I think we speak the same language. But yeah, certainly, we can just see that even for participants in this project, for some of them, the goal is to come out with a product that can be commercializable, because they may be a robotics company that wants to go to a more specialized field, because they know that later on, bigger producers of platforms are going to be the ones taking over the markets for like easy interactions between the robots and people. But inspection and maintenance requires much more tailoring of the instruments, so they want to transform their whole strategy. There's other types of participants in these projects that just do it because of the fun, for the basic research type of interest of what else can they do, what will be fun for them. And certainly the participants that provide the challenge, they want to reduce costs. They are concerned about the safety and the comfort of their workers. So they can be very well aligned, but then as the saying goes, the devil is on the details. But yeah, send me an email and we talk about expectations and promises.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I would like to invite Maarit also to the floor, and we can open up the panel discussion. And also for all of you participating, please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and also you can go to the tab on the left side, and you can raise a comment or a question if needed. But Maarit, are you with us? Yes. Okay. Great. All right. So I guess to open up the panel is we've heard from your different angles. Different policy issues which we have on the list, which we need to address, and obviously we cannot solve all of the problems, but just to open up with the question from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest policy legal issue in relation to inspection and maintenance, and how can we best approach to fix it or to solve it? So perhaps, Maarit, you can go ahead, and then I'd like to hear from Carlos as well.
Well, I think from our side is the, as we mentioned, or Peter mentioned in the presentation, is just the fact that the standards seem to be different in different countries, even across Europe, even in countries like Netherlands, Belgium, that are right next to each other. So I think just getting everything on the same level, and then also spreading the understanding into for the inspectors. So I think that would help, and I think if we can tackle Europe, after that we can tackle it globally. So yeah, I think for us that would be the major issue, and that would really much help companies across Europe.
Thank you. Thank you. Carlos, would you like to answer this as well from your angle?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, let me think in a way that can support as well Marit's observation of the standards. And I think what would be really interesting here is to learn how standards are made and established in the different sectors. So how standards are produced in the oil and gas industry, or in the in the new renewable energies fields. Sort of what has to happen for those the standards to be developed. And also, besides the most formal standards, I think it's very important and interesting as well. Peter mentioned a few very, very interesting points about what are the preferences or the styles of working, the styles of decision making within companies. So I guess it's interesting, very interesting to learn how to bring more rapidly those the boss of the boss of the boss that has the power to make the decision to come in and to decide to keep funding the technology, knowing that if large infrastructures made of steel and concrete are vulnerable, well, robots are as well. So it's going to be expensive. They are very fragile, and there has to be also a strategy of how to respond to what happens when it breaks, and when it breaks, when it has to be doing the service, and also looking at the organizational capacities to learn to give the robots themselves what they need to keep functioning on a daily basis. That's also interesting. So it's finding out in those details, I think.
Thank you. Yes, and I think it's also an interesting transition to the second question, and this is really related to the styles of decision making, and also the standards, which both of you have mentioned. So how, I mean, even just looking at Europe, right? Not even thinking, okay, from Europe to global regulation. And we have in Europe, we have different countries as well. And even in one country, we have different approaches. So just kind of going back to even what the audience has mentioned as one of the biggest challenges, which is this communication also to the other audiences, to the external audiences. Do you think that that better improved communication and education of the general public can contribute to kind of decreasing this divide between, well, even on the regional level for the countries, but also on the international level for the separate nation countries on the European level? Or do you think that this is a bit more challenging to tackle? Because even from your presentation, Carlos, I've noticed that you mentioned that communicating as well. So yeah, I guess the question is how to best approach the different regulation laws in various countries on a European level from your angle.
Okay, well, probably whatever I will say only comes from reading papers. There's because it's not easy to gain the trust of the people that are relevant for these sectors. It takes time. It's having somebody to come and ask questions, not really knowing what the questions are for. it's understandable that that barriers are there, and that probably should be there. So learning how to what are the conditions for facilitating that type of dialogue between different types of experts and non-experts, but people that can have a very, very interesting point of view, but that are not seen as being a group of concerns. So why should we invite the workers at the lower level of the organization if they only follow orders? That's the tricky thing, to relearn how to bring everybody in, and how after certain points are made, then how to show that those points are listened. Yeah, in the general public, I think, yeah, let's leave it for there.
Yeah, I mean, we are asking difficult questions, so we're trying to find the best way. Maarit, do you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, of course, communication, yes, but if we even have at the moment, or we don't have good robotic or technology training for the people who will actually start doing the jobs, like doing the inspections, doing the maintenance work. So I think it would be good to start there.
Mm-hmm.
So if people who are actually doing the job know all the pros and cons, and they know where technology is going and what it's doing, I think that would be the first step. And then after that, you go further, because these are the people who are then doing the job, and they can be really good advocates of using robotics if they are aware and know how to use them. And also, I think it's very good if they do know and they can be able to use robotics, because if you just have an external person who comes in and flies a drone or operates the robot, I don't think that will be very, it doesn't really instill trust in the people who are actually doing the job. So I think they should be involved in all of these, using the technologies.
Thank you. Yes. So, I mean, from your perspective, we should start from the industry, because this is where the people.
Well, yeah. Well, we work with industrial companies, so we have that point of view, definitely, yes. But of course, it needs to come from the legislation.
Right.
So I think both of them need to be educated in order to make this happen.
Probably also to add to that is that also inside one and the same organization, there can be also different views about what counts as the best robots that we could accept. So there can be always discrepancies that then, how you solve them, and how do you choose the best, who the best service provider or robot provider will be, and how do you decide on what that decision is based? Is it because it's cheaper or easier to use, or maybe it is that some people prefer to go for the one that is very hard to use but is very precise, instead of the one that is very, very user friendly, but probably is not the very best for the conditions in which it could be implemented. Of course, people could say, let's get the 2 or the 3 robots, but you can't do that if they are also expensive pieces of machinery.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, this is it's a good question. Okay, so then maybe I can move on to the next question, which is touching a bit on the first one, and that is how can collaboration between industry, research, organizations, and policymakers be enhanced and supported further to kind of try to implement the solutions in legal and regulation?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that, because we are trying to tackle it. So we started looking in the chemical sector on ways we could then get the legislation changed. And how we started is we tried to gather all different examples and use cases from the industry, and we are taking it to the next level, which means we're taking it to the CEFIC, which is a European organization, and hoping that they will then lobby the regulators. But I think what we are, because we're from the industry and they are on the other side, so what we need in the middle is we need the academia and the research people to actually take everything we find and do it into a more how would you call it, like in a more appropriate form in order then to take it forward with the legislators. So I think at least what we've identified is we need all of them to get the information, make the information presentable and in the right form, and then get it lobbied with the regulators. At least that's our view.
Thank you. Carlos, do you have maybe something to add, because you're on another side of this table?
Yeah, well, I think in academia, well, and for people that are interested in the non-technical sides, but that are very relevant for any decision made in the technical domain, I think, well, we are not too many. So then it's very, very hard to find people that are available at the time when it is important to bring them in. Probably, but there's now more and more interest in having social scientists looking at robots. But there's loads done in the healthcare sector. But in other industries, probably that's not that common yet. And having these type of specialists that know about the particular industry, that know about the maintenance, and that know about like innovation processes, it's we are not that many out there. So then picking them in and bringing them in at the right time, when things happen, when grants are being written, when work packages are being developed, when deliverables are, what the deliverables should be is decided, then those have to be in there. But it's getting somewhere, I guess. It's great that these type of projects are getting funded, and that yeah, there is willingness to learn. But then again, it's just everything has to happen at the right time for it to move forward much faster. Then suddenly COVID happens, and that slows down everything. The advantage is that from COVID, we have seen like how much, even though we know that the scientific side is clear, it is very, very hard to make different regions accept the same measures. That leads us to think, okay, that type of diversity is probably we have to learn to deal better with that diversity rather than expecting that it will be all standardized. But then, how do we do that is a tricky thing in there.
Yeah, and perhaps the COVID case is a good, I don't want to say best practice scenario, but the best kind of example which we can look to and see how can this different divide be addressed in different attitudes and aspects of implementation of policies, especially.
Yeah. In inspection and maintenance of infrastructures is super duper key, because it's so easy to explain why it is relevant. Seeing a bridge falling or a pipe that accidentally breaks, it's I think the communication strategy is like you only need pictures, so it's very easy to grasp why exactly we need that. So that's a good advantage and an opportunity in this field in particular, I think.
And do you think, because you touched a bit upon this communication strategy, do you think it's communicated enough, or do you see some room for communication about this more on either the national level or international level, because you both have experience with on international projects as well? Is this something where you see can be further improved or communicated a bit differently, better, worse?
I think it's hard to say. I think it's we both follow the news on the inspection maintenance and things that other people might not always follow. But I think it's if something happens like a bridge collapse, so that is definitely in the news, and it always mentions that it wasn't inspected or it wasn't maintained. So I think that level is done well. but maybe then it could be followed up by why wasn't it inspected? Was it because it's too expensive than humans or too difficult, and then ways that it could be done differently? But I think there is communication, but then it's very in the specific outlets for people who are either working in inspection and maintenance or working in technical areas. So it's not for the wider public at the moment. Oh,
And
yeah, I think for the wider are the spots and the Boston Dynamic dancing robots, which not sure are good ones for inspection and maintenance, meaning the sort of the brand that they give out or that type of thing. So yeah.
And in general, it's important as well. And going back to the question that Vasilis made about like managing expectations, we hear again and again that probably people from industry or from the public expect that robots will do already an optimal work. But yeah, we have to know that it's really, really, really hard to make a machine upload or something and not falling. It's hard. So it's important to celebrate small successes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Thank you. I see we have a question from one of our participants, and it's in the chat. And the question is, technology neutral or technology specific regulation?
I would say technology neutral, because we don't want to, I think we want to define how things are done or what could be used, not so much what it needs to be done with. So I at least from our point of view, we look at things from use case point of view, task point of view, not the technology point of view.
I think for the little that I've learned is that many times for technologies to be or for techniques to be accepted at the regulatory level, it's about the specific combination and the specific context of use. I think like in the pharmaceutical industry that I was looking at before turning into robots, that was the thing. You have to use same compounds with same, whereas it is mice or it is hamsters or it is like a bigger mammal, you have to consider all of those together to say, okay, it is acceptable to use this particular combination of elements rather than saying, okay, if we take one animal that is regulatorily validated with one particular mix of compounds that are regulatory validated, then the result is a validated process. No, it is about everything together and what it happens. But then industry sometimes, in pharmaceutical industry, I don't know about, but all the different sectors that Sprint Robotics covers, for example, it's really hard to make, well, in this case, pharmaceutical industry bring data to the authorities. They are doing it, but then it's hard to prioritize what you're producing for whom and how you present it in a way that the other party can accept it. But yeah, it's tricky. It takes time. Everything takes time.
Thank you. I believe we have another and/or question, which is global or regional regulation. So this is a bit something we touched upon a little bit, but from your perspective.
Well, the global regulation, I think, doesn't really exist, for what I've learned. And is that no confirming, Maarit, or?
No, it doesn't exist. There is no global regulation. Yeah.
And it has to make sense for us why it doesn't exist. And I think it's because, the ways in which collective decisions are made, it's different from one side or another one. If one technology was developed in the US to be used in India, but India doesn't have the procedure to look at every single component of it, it's not so easy just to take that technology and plug it here, because the whole regulatory system is not prepared to respond to the uncertainties that come to that. So it's very important to see how regional regulations are made. That is a tricky thing that takes time, that takes effort, but global standardization in most of cases doesn't happen or takes a huge amount of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think also, even if we get like European regional regulations, I think that's a very big step forward. And after that, you can start then aligning with the US and the Asian regulations. So I think, we get this one sorted, then it's easier to align globally.
Yeah, the EU is great to have like the funding that is available to make people look in those particular dimensions, and there's nothing as diverse as the EU. So that's great to have and great to use.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question from Vasilis, but perhaps Vasilis, you can speak. You can speak the question. So I would rather give this.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't sure if questions were allowed in the panel. I'm very happy to.
Absolutely, they are very much allowed.
That's great. So since you mentioned Boston Dynamics, and I very clearly remember these times when Facebook was complete with Boston Dynamics videos becoming viral, and there was this moment in time between 2014-15, when robotics and AI were one thing. And I mean, this has a long history, of course. The two concepts are always being blended. But I remember that in Europe, the first attempt at regulating robots, it had to do with giving robots rights, and it was a bit weird. It actually spoke about AI. And since then, it seems that more experts started becoming involved, each one sort of claiming stating their claims. And what happened was we have two different strands now. We have the robotics regulation strand, and now we have the new AI Act on top of a 10 years long discussion on GDPR. So privacy regulated by GDPR, AI Act regulated by high-risk AI, low-risk AI, mid-risk AI, and robotics, which is this sort of what you're covering in this fantastic workshop. So I wonder, when it comes to hindering innovation, or when it comes to dialogue between these people, in your knowledge, how much does this dialogue exist, or whether there are any obstacles in sort of not having one central form of regulation around these technologies, or whether we need some sort of central regulation?
Well, I'm no expert in this sense, but at least what I see from the industry side of things, I think, we did. So I think from the robotic side of things, it was very much focused on technology. So how do we get the technology up to date, and not so much on the data? But now it's coming back, because we realized that in order to do everything automated, in analyzing all the data that is coming from the robots, you need the AI back in again. So I think it's getting more together, but I do see that there is so the companies are a little bit there, and are these together or are they separate? And I know maybe companies have like a data organization, and then they have a robotic organization, which should be more together. So I think it's getting together again, and I think it should get together again, because otherwise we can't go towards autonomy or algorithms analyzing all the data that is coming in. But I don't know, Carlos, maybe you see this much better from the academia side of things and the research side of things, because I see what is happening in the industry side of things.
Well, probably something that I was trying to think on as a response was that I think the challenge is that there is not much understanding across sectors for what counts as good data, whether generated artificially or by the inspector with a annotating notebook. It's sort of, for what I've learned from talking to different agencies that do the water infrastructure management, all decisions are taken locally by the organization, and sometimes the infrastructure asset owner has different ways of producing and using data than their subcontractors. So then there's lots of fragmentation on production data, leaving aside the AI side. So probably before the case is that it was just impossible to think how could you standardize different ways of seeing done by people that you don't understand that well, that usually are undervalued. We don't know what goes into the head of inspectors of different sectors. Probably now having like these technologies could be a possibility to talk more about standardization in ways that before were impossible. So probably I think another way of seeing this relation between new technology and regulations, it's rather than seeing them opposed to each other, it can be a question about how new technology can be used to produce the regulation itself. How could we make sure that the quality of the data generated to inspect a bridge in Greece is the same as in Italy and in Scotland? Probably now with like more or less standardized software and techniques of assessing that data, that would be possible. So that's always a very good opportunity to learn about new regulation and new technologies together and how they can help each other, certainly, rather than crowding each other out. But I think that has nothing to do with the question.
I think the answer to the question is yes, we think they should be combined, and regulation should be done together. Yeah.
This is a very interesting point from my perspective, because the new technology and new regulation, they usually come in separate ways, because the new technology needs to get advanced before we get into this. But to really start thinking about it in parallel changes the way we think about the data and the new technology and the regulation, because some of these problems are horizontal, like we discussed in the very beginning. So it's a very interesting point. Definitely.
Probably something else too that I would add is that there's so many different ways of understanding that relation between regulation and ethics and social practices. And AI, it's huge. Like just based at the university where I work, there is not only one but two centers looking at AI and responsibility or ethics on AI. And they look at very, very different things. So it makes sense to have that many. But then it makes it very hard to go through it's a labyrinth of possibilities to try to make sense of something.
Right. Thank you, Carlos. Do we have any more questions from the audience which we would like to answer? Or perhaps we can start to wrap up with the panel discussion and go into the closing. So if you have a question, feel free to ask it now, or or you will not have a chance. I do want to mention thing before we move on to the next section, is that with this project we are trying to not only discuss these very important topics, obviously, but also to connect all of you and to make sure that this community becomes a bit more stronger and connected. So Jovita will provide her email address in the general chat, and if you would like to either get more familiar with the project or to be connected with other experts from other application areas, or would you like to contribute to the project in any way, feel free to reach out, and then we will follow up. Also, we will follow up with you after this workshop as well with the recordings and the presentations. But unless Maarit and Carlos, you have anything to add to this very fruitful panel discussion, I would like to move on to our final survey question. Good.
Nothing to add.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. So yes, let's move to the survey. So this workshop helped me improve my understanding of the issues robotic faces. Obviously, we discussed about the robotics in the inspection and maintenance area, but this is what this answer would rely on. So we have a few of you voting, so I will give you some time. And obviously, we cannot really answer all of the questions and come up with all of the solutions, but this is why we have this project, to start these discussions and to learn from your experience as well, and also to think how can we further increase this kind of engagement and interaction. So at least I see none of you have answered not at all and slightly. So I think this is a good way. We do have one answer slightly, but still, hopefully none of us will think that not at all is a solution. So I think we can wait a few more moments, and we can close this poll. This was new to me. We have a few respondents here, so this is a great thing, because we're also trying to educate and bring some of these topics to a higher level of awareness. So it's also a great answer, great to hear. All right, so I think we can close this poll. And I believe this is the only question we have. So I would like to once again thank you all for participating and staying with us. This was a very fruitful discussion. Great topics were covered, and I would like to thank also to our experts who stayed with us and shared their insights, and also provided some new findings for us. We will stay in touch with you after. So once again, thank you everyone, and have a great rest of the day and the week. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us and for making discussions possible. So till next time.
Till next time. Goodbye. Thank you all. Jovita, I think we can in a few moments close the link as well, because I believe the official part of the workshop is